Thank you for joining us. This is Health Your Own Way podcast, and I am your host, Mo Atkins. Welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about understanding grief from a man's perspective. I've already had guests and speakers that talked about grief in the past, but it was more of a woman's perspective. So I'm really happy to have Dan today, who is my guest, to share his knowledge and his insight. And I feel like this is a very important conversation. So, Dan, thank you very much for being part of this conversation today with me.
Mo, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this important subject, and um, men's grief has been overlooked as far as I'm concerned, and I want to get the message out and to help more men feel comfortable with the fact that we don't have to do it on our own.
I appreciate you saying that because, sometimes as women or even as society, we don't really take insight of how a man's feeling. They're supposed to be, all muscular, well, not muscular, but, all manly and just basically keep their feelings. And I'm going to ask you in your own words, what does grief mean to you?
Well, grief is whenever your life doesn't turn out the way that you've planned. That's as simple as I can put it. To expand on that, it is the feelings and emotions that occur when you've experienced significant loss of any kind, and the emotions that are caused when a familiar pattern of
Life. I know where you're going
life,
with
yeah,
this. Dan, I
yeah,
know where you're going with this.
a familiar pattern of behavior changes.
When you said that, um, for the first time in my entire, like over the past years, I think I've been very selfish because my dad just retired a few years ago. And I didn't, when you said when things change or, I didn't realize he was dealing with grief, and the person that he's become is based on the fact that he's trying to, deal with the grief of loss of change,
Hmm.
and then you said something about familiar, like when your job is when people's job is their identity, when it changes, right?
That's right.
So
That whole perspective, the loss of identity, similar to the loss of health. You can grieve that. Uh, we've found that there are over 40 different lifetime occurrences that happen that can cause grief. Loss of a job, moving, of course, loss due to the death of a loved one or the loss of a relationship. Um, Even to the point where it can be the loss of a significant pet that you've had. We've had people come to us because pets are unconditional love. And when you lose something like that, you can really go into a downward spiral.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm thinking for men, a lot of men, especially with the COVID-19 going on right now, right?
Mhm.
And I find that as a society, we make it not easy for men to deal with their grief or embrace it. Um, do you, I guess, I know this is like a very heavy question itself, but is there a reason why you think as a society we make men feel like they can't grieve properly in any form?
Well, um, it has to do with the myths that we associate with grief. The idea that men have to be strong, that we have to grieve alone, shoulder our burden. Um, One of the favorite ones that come to mind is the expression that everybody's heard, um, that time heals all wounds. Well, yeah, you can heal, but if you don't take the proper steps, it's not going to heal very well. And you can imagine if you broke your arm and didn't do anything with it, it would heal. You'd be able to use it somewhat, but it wouldn't be the same. The same thing happens with your heart when you've experienced grief. Uh, the expression brokenhearted. It's not your head that is broken, it's your heart. And there are things that you can do to heal that. And that's what we're here to talk about. But men are uncomfortable with that conversation. And it has to do with that idea of being strong and not showing that we can be vulnerable. And I know that it frustrates women that we are unable to connect to those feelings. Um, and what I like to say, and something that I heard in a men's workshop a long time ago, that men have five basic emotions that we acknowledge or are aware of. We fear, we have shame, uh, and we're mad, glad, and sad. Um,
Okay.
and each of those have um, various levels to them. Um, but those are the basic uh, things that we function from. But there's a whole
Different levels.
different level, yeah, that you can get to if you're willing to do the work and go into your grief. You can't really solve that grief without the willingness to know that um, something's wrong, and then be willing to do the work to get yourself back on track and recover your broken dreams and heal your broken heart and you know move through it, whether that's a relationship, the loss of a partner, the loss of a parent. We all will experience these over the course of our lives, and grief accumulates if we don't um, take the time and develop the tools to move through our grief.
I'm listening to you talk, and I think, it makes sense. Like logically, what you're saying makes sense. And I find that, is it fair to say that a lot of men don't know how to ask for help?
That's a big thing. We've been told that you have to grieve alone. And I know from my experience, the first thing that I did was I had to show my family that I was strong and that I was going to be able to be there for them. And the way that I dealt with my grief was to compartmentalize it. I put it in a little, box in my head, and I'll deal with it when I have time. Well, it wasn't until that noise happened in my head that I had to pay attention to that box that was rattling on the shelf and open it up and do the work that I began to do my healing.
But not a lot of people get to where you are. And I say this because I find that there's some fault from the women end, from the women's side, in respects to how we we prevent our men from sharing their feelings, because there are women out there, I'm not going to blame it on men, that don't want, with quotations, a weak man. So they want a strong man. And I think that's very detrimental for even their kids, like their sons, or for their husbands, because mental health is like, grief is a form of mental health. Like if you can't heal properly, or even be open to talk to that significant other, you can't give 100% to yourself, and you're never truly happy. Is that fair to say?
I think it is very true. As a matter of fact, a conversation that I've recently had was about the idea that grief can cause an amazing transformation to happen in your life. Um, but why does it take a trauma like the loss of someone to generate transition and to change the way that we approach life? Many cultures have um, um, initiations into adulthood. And I think that we've lost some connection to um, developing, our young men into
Functional
adults.
men, yes.
Yeah, that are in touch with their emotions, that are authentic, and speak with integrity. And it's so much bravado and so much uh,
Toxicity,
that false sense of who you are as a person, and yeah, it gives me a lot of hope to have these kinds of conversations to hopefully um, light that light bulb that you know makes the difference in our work. What we like to say is we do this to change the conversation around grief. And I think, again, those are important conversations to have.
I appreciate it. I know you keep saying, your work. So for the audience, or specifically, I know that you're a grief recovery specialist, correct?
Yes.
Just give us some high level insight of what that is specifically, and can that actually help? What you do can that actually help men heal faster?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for the question. Yeah, the grief recovery, I came upon the grief recovery program as my search for something. My background in my career was as an engineer and a construction manager. There we deal with a lot of day-to-day problems, day-to-day things that seem too overwhelming, and the approach was to break things down into its smaller components and then to solve each piece of the puzzle. What I found with the grief recovery system is much the same approach. It was developed by an engineer who had a trauma, lost a baby with his wife, and uh, now this was 40 years ago, didn't have some of the programs that are available um, to work through things. So he developed his own. And it's an action based program that has been evidence based. Study was done by Kent State University, um, Dr. Nolan and Dr. Hallam, that showed that if you follow the plan and as laid out with the grief recovery method, um, that you can find your happiness and move forward with your life, um, reclaiming your broken dreams and you know learning from that transition. So uh, I know it worked for me, and I offer it to other men.
I like that. I think you know nobody really sits down or talks about grief. I remember, like, I'm not going to age myself, Dan. Okay, I'm not going to age myself, but for me, for me, within the past 6 7 months, my eyes has opened up in respects to what grief is. I think I've had the misconception that grief was related to specifically death. Um, and just talking to you, I feel like a lot of people are grieving now. I am, everybody's grieving because it is a change of life. And I
Very
think,
much.
at one point, not to sound cold, but at one point we have to take full responsibility of our life and know that we need to heal. So if anybody's watching or listening, like, especially men, like, a lot of people lost jobs. There's a lot of people getting divorced right now, so I'm not, and a lot of them need to be able to find a way to heal, because if you can't heal, then you're toxic to somebody else's that you may meet, and you may not be able to deal with that kind of situation going forward. And I think, if you don't mind sharing with us, what are some of the benefits that you got personally from going through the grief recoveries?
Um,
If you don't have to.
well, no, no, what came out of it for me, aside from the uh, helping others now in their grief process, was it drew my wife and I closer together. We're going to be celebrating 45 years of marriage this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And um, we lost our daughter 20 years ago, kind of in the middle of this, and we struggled. We had to grieve separately because a man and a woman grieve differently, just as everyone grieves differently, and everyone feels their grief at 100%. I don't know what your grief process is or how deeply you feel it, but I know that you feel it 100%. Same for me. And when we did our work alone, we were able to come back together to honor our daughter and to do this work and to develop the mission of helping other people. So that's what I get out of it, aside from the fact that I know that I'm honoring her memory
Oh, I
by
like
doing
that.
this.
I think, if people were interested in, reaching out to you, learning more about your method, your service, what's the best platform to reach you out on?
We are web-based. We do our work virtually uh, with people across the country. Um, our website is www.beingwithgrief.com. And if people feel that they need help right now, they could reach me on my phone. Um, that number is on the website, but I can give it to you now.
No, we'll leave it on the
That's
website so that people don't just start giving. Yeah.
okay. Yes, that's a good idea, but I'm that serious about it, and I do, uh,
I can
if
tell, like, it means a lot to you. I can tell.
well, yeah. I mean, I've had people call um, with the last straw. They are willing to end their lives because they are in so much pain, and to see them thrive again after our work together means a lot, and certainly means a lot to their families. And uh, uh, unfortunately, there's so much pain associated with it that people come to the end of their rope, and they need um,
I
to
know what you
find
mean.
that healing. Yeah,
Yeah. When I'm talking to you and I'm listening to you talk, I can tell that this is like a passion for you. Like, this is a purpose. Like, you feel like this is a purpose for you. Because I think, not to get into personal with you, but you've learned and you had your own issues and you were able to come out of it. And then coming from that dark spot, you were able to help people, and especially men, just listening or even watching. It's just more of the fact that, Dan can do it. You know, if Dan can do it, you can do it as well.
exactly. One of the things that the grief recovery method talks about is we rely on short-term energy reducing behaviors. Um, they shorten that to STIRBs, and those STIRBs help us in the moment, um, but because they make us feel better, and but we can become reliant on those, and when we rely on them too much, they can turn into addictions. And I've seen many men, in my career as a construction manager, um, drink too much, eat too much, turn to gambling, turn to
Other forms.
other forms, for women, it could be too much shopping because it makes you feel better. But
Find an escape.
right, yeah, and it's an escape. But uh, you don't want it to turn into an addiction. And there's things that you can do to turn that around. Um, that's what becoming, educating yourself into, and developing the tools so that you know how to deal with grief and frustration, and how to move forward with your life when things don't turn out the way you planned.
I have a question before I let you go. For the grief recovery specialist, for you, do you help young kids as well? Because I know a lot of them have been had to deal with the change of, not going to school online. Like, there's a huge dynamic change, and some of them haven't been able to see their friends. Have you been able to help, or do you offer that to kids or adolescents?
Well, there is a grief recovery program that does work with children. It's
Okay.
because we work remotely. It is done with a parent or guardian along with them, so that they both can learn the tools that they need to help one another. similar to the way that my wife and I, we had to grieve separately before we could grieve together. And if a child is grieving, then it's pretty certain that the family is grieving as well. And so, yes, for um, any of the um, topics that we've discussed, there are programs available and a host of other resources, some of which are located on our website. And we're happy to share those with anyone who has questions.
Fair enough. I am going to have the website in the profile as well as in the video itself. So I wanted to say, thank you very much for having this conversation with me. I think a lot of people don't realize that there is many grief, and I think men, if you're out there listening, reach out to Dan if you need, or just look it up. But it's just the first step is just really trying to look for some tools by yourself, and then if you can't do by yourself, reach out and look for assistance.
Yeah, this is the Grief Recovery Handbook. It's available on Amazon.
Okay.
The grief recovery method is also on the web. It's over, I think at last count, 2,500 practitioners who are available across the country. I speak highly of them. They are well trained and can help. Again, getting the word out is the important thing, and that men do not need to grieve alone in isolation. And there are resources out there that can help.
I appreciate it. I want to say once again, thanks for being part of this conversation, being part of my platform. This means a lot to me, because I feel like, a lot of conversations not talked about on the man's perspective, and I wanted to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you. Yeah. So often men just talk at a surface level, and it's only when we get to our heart and speak from our hearts that real change can happen. And it's so necessary in the world today.
Fair enough. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you join us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, share with anyone that needs to be empowered and inspired, and don't forget to join us next week for the next episode of Health Your Way Podcast. Have a good day, you guys.